A customer asked for the usual route, then walked into the stockroom and vanished. I had been alone behind the counter when it happened, the night shift stretching thin and quiet the way it always did after midnight. The store lights flickered in tired pulses overhead, fluorescent tubes buzzing like trapped insects. The refrigeration units along the back wall hummed steadily, a low mechanical breathing that filled the silence between passing cars on the highway outside. The air smelled of old cardboard, spilled soda syrup, and the sharp sting of cleaning fluid from my half-hearted mopping earlier. He came in without triggering the door chime. That was the first thing that stuck with me later. I didn't hear the bell. One moment the aisles were empty, shelves lined with dusty chips and energy drinks, and the next he was standing at the counter, hands folded neatly, eyes reflecting the lights in a way that made them look deeper than they should have been. "Evening," I said, because that's what you say. He smiled like he recognized me, though I'd never seen him before. "The usual route," he said, polite, expectant. I waited for the rest. Gas on pump 3, a pack of smokes, a joke. But he just stood there. The hum of the refrigerators swelled in my ears. Somewhere behind me, a cooler compressor kicked on with a clatter. "I'm sorry," I said. "The usual what?" "The usual route," he repeated, gently correcting me. His voice sounded like it had traveled a long way to get here. I laughed, a short, nervous sound. "You want the bathroom, it's out back." He shook his head. "Stockroom." I glanced at the camera monitor by the register out of habit. The black and white feed showed the aisles, the pumps outside, the narrow hall leading to the stockroom door. Nothing strange, just me and him. "There's nothing back there for customers," I said. The words felt thin. The lights flickered again, dimming for a half-second that felt longer. He nodded, satisfied. "I know." Before I could stop him, he walked past the counter. His shoes made no sound on the tile. He pushed through the stockroom door, and it swung shut behind him with its familiar hollow thud. I waited for him to come back out. The stockroom was a dead end. I'd worked here 3 years. Shelves of boxed snacks, stacked paper towels, the mop sink, the breaker panel. No windows, no back exit. The only door was the one he'd just used. After a minute, I called out, "Hey, you can't be back there." No answer. The hum of the refrigeration units seemed louder now, as if the store were listening. I went around the counter and opened the stockroom door. The smell hit me first. Old cardboard and damp dust, the same as always, layered with something colder, like air from a basement that hadn't been opened in decades. The shelves stood in their usual crooked rows. The mop bucket sat where I'd left it. The breaker panel was closed. He was gone. I checked behind the shelves, even though there wasn't room for a person. I checked the ceiling, half expecting a trapdoor I knew wasn't there. I stepped back out, shut the door, and opened it again. Still gone. I stood there too long, my heart knocking against my ribs. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. The store felt subtly wrong, like a room after someone leaves without saying goodbye. I told myself he'd slipped past me somehow, though the idea made no sense. I finished my shift in a fog, jumping every time the compressors kicked on, watching the stockroom door from the corner of my eye. I didn't tell my boss. In a small town, stories get legs fast, and I needed the job. But the next night, when I was restocking shelves, I noticed the marks. They were faint scuffs on the linoleum, half-moon shapes like the edges of saws, starting at the stockroom door and curving inward. They weren't fresh. Some were worn almost smooth, layered over each other, following the same gentle arc every time. A route. I pulled an old clipboard from a shelf, the one we used to log deliveries. Tucked behind the last page was a yellowed incident report, dated 15 years back. Missing person. Night clerk. Last seen entering stockroom. No sign of struggle. No exit. There were more. Folded receipts with names circled. A Polaroid of the backroom shelves, something blurred in the corner that might have been a doorway, or might have been nothing at all. I started measuring. The stockroom was bigger on the inside. Not by much. Inches, maybe. But the back wall sat farther away than it had the night before. The shelves seemed to lean inward at an angle that made my eyes ache if I stared too long. The floor scuffs curved into a space that wasn't there yesterday. On the third night, the lights went out for a full second while I was back there. In the dark, I heard footsteps, soft, patient, circling me, following the arc of the marks. When the lights came back, I was alone, standing somewhere that smelled older than the store itself. I tried to leave. I reached for the door and found another aisle instead. Shelves bending away, cardboard boxes labeled in my handwriting, dated years I hadn't worked here yet. The hum followed me, deeper now, like something vast breathing behind the walls. I remembered the customer's smile. Recognition. I followed the scuffs. The route curved gently, always returning me to the same place, the same shelves, the same smell. Time folded in on itself. I passed a version of the mop sink rusted through, then new again. I saw names scratched into the wall, some familiar, some that might have been mine. When I finally found the door, I pushed through, gasping, and stumbled into the store. The lights flickered. The refrigerators hummed. I was behind the counter. A man stood there, hands folded, eyes deep and reflective. He looked tired, older than me. "Evening," he said. I opened my mouth, and the words came out soft and certain, like I'd said them 100 times before. The usual route. The store's security footage showed me standing still, even as I moved. I discovered it at 2:17 a.m., during the stretch of the night when time stopped pretending to pass. Outside the glass doors, the highway was empty, its asphalt slick with fog that reflected the orange sodium lights like a drowned sky. Inside, the convenience store felt sealed off from the rest of the world, a humming box of fluorescence and refrigeration. The overhead lights buzzed in uneven rhythms, some brighter than others, casting pale bands across the linoleum. The drink coolers exhaled cold air in steady sighs. The smell of old cardboard, disinfectant, and burned coffee clung to everything. No customers, no cars, just me, the hum, and the monitors behind the counter. I hadn't meant to check the cameras. I was wiping down the counter, moving from register to lottery stand, when one of the screens flickered, just a twitch of static like an eye blinking. I looked up out of habit. The monitor grid showed the store from its usual angles. Front door, snack aisle, coolers, stockroom hall, and the wide shot of the register area. In that last frame, I was standing behind the counter, perfectly still. I frowned and glanced down at myself. My arm was mid-motion, cloth dragging across laminate. I could feel the pressure in my wrist, the faint vibration of the refrigeration units through the floor. But on the screen, I wasn't moving. I stood straight, hands resting flat on the counter, head tilted slightly forward, not blinking, not breathing. For a second, I assumed lag. The system was old, held together by cheap parts and habit. I waved at the camera. On the monitor, I didn't respond. The cloth slipped from my fingers. I stepped back, heart beginning to pick up speed. My reflection in the microwave door moved normally. The glass of the cooler doors showed me shifting, pale and tired under the lights. The screen did not. I leaned closer. The image quality was grainy, but clear enough to see details I didn't like. The way my shoulders slumped at an angle I wasn't holding, the faint shadow under my eyes deeper than it should have been. Behind that version of me, something was wrong with the store. The aisles were longer, the ceiling higher. The fluorescent lights in the footage receded into a depth that didn't exist when I looked up with my own eyes. I checked the timestamp. It matched the current minute. I turned away from the monitors and walked 3 steps toward the coffee machine. My shoes squeaked softly on the tile. The smell of scorched grounds grew stronger. I looked back. On the screen, I was still behind the counter, frozen. A thin pressure settled behind my eyes, the start of a headache. I pulled up the playback controls and rewound 10 minutes, then 30, then an hour. No matter where I stopped it, the same image waited for me. Myself, standing still at the register, unmoving, while the rest of the store flickered subtly around me. Lights pulsed, shadows shifted, the doors breathed fog in and out. But I never moved. I scrubbed forward, heart pounding. At 1:42 a.m., the image stuttered. For 3 frames, the frozen version of me smiled. I didn't remember smiling. I didn't remember most of the last hour. A cold realization crawled up my spine. I checked the register log. There was a transaction at 1:51, gas on pump 4, paid in cash. I hadn't seen anyone come in. I didn't remember touching the register. On the footage, the doors slid open at 1:50. Fog poured inside like smoke. A shape stood just beyond the threshold, wrong in a way the camera struggled to render, edges blurring, height inconsistent from frame to frame. It didn't approach the counter. It stood beside me, close enough that our shoulders overlapped slightly on the screen, the image distorting where we touched. The thing leaned in, its head aligning with mine, and then the footage skipped. When it resumed, I was alone again, still frozen. I stepped away from the counter, breathing hard. The hum of the lights seemed louder now, angrier. Cold air licked at my ankles. I felt watched. Not from the aisles, but from behind my eyes, like something pressed against the inside of my skull. I went to the bathroom mirror and splashed water on my face. The person staring back looked like me, but my smile felt delayed, arriving a fraction of a second after I willed it. I checked my phone. I had texts I didn't remember sending, short replies to my boss, time-stamped during the missing hour. My typing style, my spelling mistakes. I returned to the monitors. The frozen me had changed positions. My head was turned slightly now, eyes angled toward the camera. Toward me. The smile was wider. I scrubbed backward again, searching for the moment it started. The earliest footage of the night showed me stocking shelves, moving normally. Then, at exactly 12:06 a.m., the image tore for a single frame. After that, I never moved again. Except I remembered moving. I remembered pacing during slow hours, stretching my back, refilling coffee, checking the doors. The memories felt real, solid, textured, but when I tried to pin them to specific times, they slid apart like wet paper. I noticed something else then. In the reflection of the cooler doors on the monitor, the faint mirrored surfaces behind the frozen me. There was motion. A second figure moved where I did not. It walked the aisles, leaned over the counter, passed through spaces the camera couldn't quite resolve. Its outline matched mine, but its movements were slightly off, delayed and too smooth, like a video playing at the wrong frame rate. That was me. Or at least it was the me I remembered being. The realization hit with sickening clarity. The footage wasn't wrong. The version of me on the screen was the one anchored to the store, fixed in place, marking time. The one walking, thinking, panicking, that was something else, moving in the gaps between frames. A presence brushed past my shoulder then, close enough that the cold sank into my bones. I smelled damp concrete and ozone, like air before a storm. The lights flickered, and for a heartbeat, the store stretched, aisles lengthening, ceiling rising, matching the impossible geometry of the footage. I heard my own voice behind me, soft and amused. "You shouldn't watch yourself too long." I turned. The counter was empty. On the monitor, the frozen me lifted a hand and waved. Slowly, deliberately, the feed zoomed in on my face. My eyes on the screen were alive now, tracking me with calm attention. The smile widened, familiar and wrong. I felt myself slowing, my limbs growing heavy, movements dragging as if wading through syrup. Each step toward the counter took effort, while the pull behind my eyes grew stronger, guiding me into alignment. The last thing I saw before the world flattened into flicker and hum was the monitor switching to live view. The version of me on screen stood still again, and I was finally where I belonged, watching from the other side.